She was just a small girl from a quiet village, hidden deep in the heart of a forgotten place. No electricity, no clean water, no one ever spoke of dreams there. Her name was Aisha. She had no toys, no books, not even shoes. Every morning she would walk barefoot on rough, dusty roads. Her little feet knew the pain of sharp stones and burning sun. But still, she walked. She walked with a heart full of hope and a head filled with silent prayers. She never complained. She never cried. She just kept walking. Her parents were poor farmers, good people, but life had been cruel to them. They could barely feed their children, let alone send them to school. And Aisha, she was the eldest of 5. At only 10 years old, she already knew what sacrifice meant. So when a family from the city came to her village, looking for a young girl to help in their home, Aisha's mother said yes, not because she didn't love her daughter, but because she loved her too much to let her suffer more. And just like that, Aisha's life changed. She arrived in the city in the back seat of a big, black SUV. It was the first time she had ever been inside a car. Her eyes were wide with wonder, filled with fear and curiosity. Tall buildings, fast cars, clean streets. It all looked like a different world. And then, the gates opened. The house was like a palace, painted white with golden lights and large windows. The garden was full of flowers she had never seen before. The air smelled different, like perfume and power. She stood at the entrance, barefoot, holding a small nylon bag that carried all she owned, 2 dresses, 1 wrapper, and an old photo of her family. When the security man opened the door and called someone, she took a step back. She was scared. She didn't know how to speak English very well. She didn't know what kind of people lived in such a big house. Then she saw him, a tall man, dressed in a simple white shirt and trousers. His face looked serious, like someone who had seen too much of the world. That was Mr. Williams, the billionaire. He was one of the richest men in the country. Everyone knew his name. But in that moment, he didn't look at her like a billionaire. He looked at her like a father. She looked down, shy and silent, her tiny feet covered in dust, her hands trembling. She expected to be shouted at or sent away, but instead, he smiled. "Where are your shoes?" he asked gently. She shook her head. I don't have any, sir," she whispered. Mr. Williams nodded slowly. Then he called his wife. "Bring her something to eat," he said, "and find her some shoes." And just like that, Aisha's journey began. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to become a story the world would never forget. A story of love, a story of kindness, a story of how a billionaire gave a barefoot girl more than just shoes. He gave her a future. And this was only the beginning. The first night in the mansion was the hardest. Aisha sat on the edge of a soft bed in a small room made just for her. It was the first time she had ever slept on a mattress. The blanket smelled of lavender. The curtains were silk. Everything around her felt too clean, too quiet, too big. She didn't know how to behave. She didn't know if she belonged. She missed her little brothers. She missed her mother's rough hands and her father's soft voice when he prayed under the stars. So she cried. She didn't make a sound. She just let the tears fall down her cheeks and onto the white bed sheets. She cried herself to sleep that night, scared, alone, and unsure of what the next day would bring. By morning, everything had changed again. She was up early. She swept the living room, cleaned the kitchen floor, and helped the cook wash the dishes. She worked hard, too hard for a child her age, but she didn't complain. It was all she knew. Then, at 9 a.m. sharp, he came down the stairs, Mr. Williams, the man who owned everything, the cars, the house, the companies, the respect of the world. He was a billionaire, but not the kind you see in movies, flashing gold and noise. He was quiet, calm, serious, the kind of man whose presence filled a room even when he said nothing. He walked past the kitchen with a newspaper in one hand and a steaming cup of tea in the other. Aisha stood still, head down, hands folded in front of her apron. Her heart pounded in her chest. She thought he wouldn't notice her. But he stopped, and for the second time in her life, he looked at her, not like a maid, but like a person. "Good morning," he said, his voice deep and smooth. Aisha looked up slowly. "Good morning, sir," she replied, her voice barely a whisper. "You cleaned the floor?" he asked. "Yes, sir." "Well done," he said with a nod. "What's your name?" She was surprised. No one had asked before. Not the driver, not the other staff, not even the cook. "Aisha," she said. "How old are you, Aisha?" 10, sir." He paused for a long moment, then gave her a small smile. 10 is too young to carry the world on your back. And with that, he walked away. Those words echoed in Aisha's mind for days. No one had ever spoken to her like that, with respect, with kindness, like she mattered. From that moment on, she watched him, quietly, secretly. She watched how he treated his employees, with calm dignity. How he kissed his wife on the forehead before he left for work. How his children ran to him every evening, and how he laughed with them like he wasn't the busiest man in the world. She started to believe maybe he wasn't just a rich man. Maybe he was something more. Someone who understood. One day, about a week later, Aisha was in the garden picking fallen leaves. The sun was hot, and sweat ran down her forehead. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since dawn. She bent to pick another leaf, but her legs gave out. She fell softly into the grass. When she looked up, Mr. Williams was standing there. He didn't shout. He didn't ask why she was being lazy. He crouched down beside her and offered her a bottle of cold water. "Go inside and rest," he said gently. "You're still a child. You need food, not pressure." Tears filled her eyes. She nodded and stood slowly. Before she walked away, she turned and asked, "Sir, why are you so kind to me?" He smiled again, not with his mouth, but with his eyes, "Because someone was kind to me too, once." From that day forward, Aisha knew this man wasn't just her boss. He was a gift, a blessing, a door to something she never thought possible. She began to dream again. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't born to suffer. Maybe her life was meant for something more. And Mr. Williams? He had no idea that the quiet girl with dust on her feet was about to become one of the brightest lights in his life. It had been 6 months since Aisha arrived at the mansion. By now, she had grown used to waking up in a clean bed. She no longer jumped at the sound of the washing machine. She had learned how to fold clothes, arrange flowers, and serve tea with quiet grace. But still, she spoke very little. She smiled, but not too often. She was helpful, but she kept her dreams locked deep inside her heart, like a secret she wasn't allowed to tell. Because even though she was in a better place, she never forgot where she came from. She remembered the hunger, the shame, the people in the village who said, "Girls like you don't go far." She believed them until one Sunday evening, everything changed. The family had just returned from church. The mansion was peaceful. The children were watching cartoons in the living room. Madam Williams was upstairs changing her clothes, and Mr. Williams, he was in the garden. Aisha was trimming the rose bushes quietly when he came to sit on the bench nearby. She tried to walk away, not wanting to disturb him, but he raised his hand. "Stay," he said. "Let's talk." Talk? No one ever asked Aisha to talk. She held her breath and stood still, unsure of what to say. Mr. Williams looked at her kindly, his eyes soft behind his glasses. "You've been here for a while now," he said. "Do you like it?" Aisha nodded. "Yes, sir." "Do you miss your family?" She paused. "Yes, sir, very much." He nodded slowly. Then there was silence, a long, thoughtful silence. And then he asked the question, a question that would change her life forever. "Aisha, if you could go to school, would you want to?" Her heart stopped. She blinked. Once, twice. No one had ever asked her that before. School was for others, for rich children, for people with names that opened doors, not for a barefoot village girl who didn't even know how to hold a pen properly. She stammered, looking at the ground. "I don't know, sir." "Why not?" She was quiet for a long time. Then she spoke in a whisper. "Because girls like me don't go to school." Mr. Williams looked at her carefully. "Who told you that?" "My uncle, my neighbors, everyone." "And what do you believe?" She looked up slowly, and for the first time he saw it in her eyes, the tiny flicker of a hidden fire. I want to learn," she said quietly. "But it's not for me. We are poor. I came here to work." Mr. Williams nodded. Then he stood up. "Well," he said firmly, "what if I told you that you are going to school?" Aisha looked up in shock. "Sir?" "You heard me," he smiled. "You'll work here part-time, but you'll go to school like every child should. You have a sharp mind. I see it every time you solve a problem before anyone else. You're meant for more than sweeping floors." Tears welled up in her eyes. She had dreamed of school. She had seen it in her sleep, sitting in a classroom, holding books, answering questions. But every time she woke up, the dream disappeared like smoke. Now it was real. That night, Aisha couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her heart full of wonder. Could this really be happening? Could a man like Mr. Williams, rich, powerful, and respected, really believe in her? She felt seen. She felt heard. For the first time in her life, she felt chosen. The next morning, Madam Williams came to her room with a package. Inside was a school bag, a neat pair of black shoes, a set of uniforms, and brand new exercise books. "From Daddy and I," she said with a smile. "Your journey starts today." Aisha held the bag to her chest and wept. That one question, if you could go to school, would you want to? That simple sentence broke the walls around her soul. Because sometimes, all it takes to change a life is for someone to ask the right question at the right time with a heart full of love. Mr. Williams didn't just give Aisha a chance. He gave her a voice. He gave her a dream. He gave her the beginning of a new story. And she was ready to write it. The sun rose gently over the city, casting golden light across the windows of the mansion. But inside a small room tucked behind the guest wing, one little girl sat wide awake. Aisha hadn't slept all night. She sat quietly on her bed, holding a brand new school bag tightly against her chest. Her heart raced with excitement and fear. Today she would wear a school uniform. Today she would sit in a classroom for the first time. Today she would become something she had only dared to imagine, a student. But deep down, Aisha was scared. The moment came. She slipped on her white shirt and deep blue pinafore, her fingers shaking slightly. She laced up her shiny black shoes, the first real shoes she had ever owned. They felt strange but strong, like they carried her into a world she didn't understand yet. Madam Williams entered the room and smiled. "You look beautiful," she said gently. "Come, let's take a picture." Aisha smiled shyly as Madam Williams placed a hand on her shoulder and snapped a photo. It would later sit framed on the family's hallway table, the photo of a new beginning. They arrived at the school gates. Children rushed in through the big blue gate, laughing, calling each other's names, carrying colorful lunchboxes. Their uniforms were clean, their shoes polished, their hair neat. Aisha stood frozen, clutching her bag. Her heart pounded. She didn't know how to speak well. She didn't know what page they were on in their books. She didn't know how to ask questions or where to sit. Would they laugh at her? Would they see her as just a maid from someone's house? Mr. Williams walked beside her, sensing her fear. He knelt down and looked her in the eyes. "Aisha," he said softly, "you are not less than anyone. Don't be afraid to learn slowly. Every great person started with a first day." She nodded slowly, her eyes shining with silent tears. And then she walked through the gates. The first day was hard. She sat at the back of the classroom, silent and small. The teacher smiled at her, but didn't pressure her. Her classmates looked at her with curiosity. Some smiled, some whispered, but no one was cruel. Still, everything felt difficult. The letters on the board danced in front of her eyes. Numbers confused her. The other students seemed so confident, answering questions quickly. Aisha stayed quiet, copying slowly, afraid of being wrong. At lunch, she sat alone, but she didn't cry, because in her heart, something was changing. A small, steady voice whispered, "You're here now. Keep going." Each evening, when she returned home, Madam Williams helped her with homework. They sat together at the dining table. When she got a word right, Madam clapped softly and said, "Well done, my dear." Mr. Williams would peek in and smile. "That's my girl." They didn't treat her like a maid. They treated her like a daughter. And slowly, Aisha began to believe she could do this, but the road was not easy. One Friday, 2 months into school, Aisha came home holding her test papers. Her eyes were red. She had failed. Math, 18%. English, 30%. Science, 25%. She placed the papers on the table and whispered, "I'm not smart enough. I don't belong." Mr. Williams sat beside her quietly. He looked at the papers, then at her. "I once failed my first business proposal," he said. "I thought it was over for me too, but failure is not the end. It is the beginning of a new lesson." He smiled and gently tapped her head. "Your brain is powerful, Aisha. Don't give up on it." The next morning, a tutor arrived at the mansion, a kind lady named Miss Ephioma. She began teaching Aisha after school, slowly, patiently. They started with alphabets again, with counting, with simple words, and Aisha began to shine. She read her first full sentence after 3 weeks. She solved her first math problem in 2 months. She smiled brighter than she ever had before. The other staff began cheering her on. The cook gave her extra fruit when she got a correct answer. The driver offered to quiz her with spelling on rides. The mansion wasn't just a place of work anymore. It became her school, her family, her cheering squad. And one day, Aisha did something she had never done before. She picked up a pen and wrote a letter. It was short, just a few lines. She placed it on Mr. Williams' study table. "Dear Daddy, thank you for letting me dream. I will not waste this chance. I will make you proud." From a barefoot girl with dusty feet to a student with dreams, from silence and fear to hope, books, and boldness, Aisha was no longer just a house help. She was becoming something greater. She was learning to dream again. It started with one letter. Aisha sat alone in her room one quiet evening. Her schoolwork was done, her chores were finished, and the house had gone still. But inside her heart, something was stirring. There were so many feelings, too big to hold inside. So many things she wanted to say, but didn't know how to speak. So, she picked up a pen. She found an old notebook Madam Williams had given her. The pages were still crisp. The first page was blank, like her new life. And so, she wrote, "Dear God, today I did not understand everything in class, but I tried. I sat in front and raised my hand. The teacher smiled. That made me happy. Thank you for my books. Thank you for Mr. and Mrs. Williams. Thank you for not forgetting me. I promise I will keep going, even when it's hard. Love, Aisha." It was simple, just a little letter. But when she read it back to herself, she felt something new. Strength, pride, and hope. She tore out the page gently, folded it neatly, and placed it under her pillow. The next night, she wrote again. "Dear Mr. Williams, you probably don't know this, but when you said I could go to school, you saved me. I didn't know I was allowed to dream. Now I dream every night. I want to be a teacher one day so I can help girls like me. Thank you for seeing me." She didn't plan to show it to him. It was just for her. But Madam Williams found the note 2 days later while helping clean Aisha's room. She didn't say anything. She just took it gently and showed it to her husband. Mr. Williams read it in silence. Then he folded it and placed it in his drawer, next to his most valuable possessions. He didn't say anything either. But the next time Aisha walked into the study, he stood and said, "Someday, people will read your words and feel stronger. Never stop writing." And so, Aisha began writing every night. Sometimes her letters were to God, sometimes to her late grandmother, sometimes to the little girl she used to be, the one who walked barefoot under the sun with a stomach growling from hunger. She wrote about her dreams. She wrote about school, about friendship, about how sometimes she still felt afraid. She wrote about strength and how she was learning to find it, even in her smallness. One day, she left a letter on the table in the kitchen for the cook. "Dear Mama Grace, thank you for always keeping my food warm, even when I come home late. You remind me of my own mother. I hope I can cook as well as you one day." Mama Grace found the note and cried quietly while stirring soup. Soon, everyone in the mansion began receiving little letters tucked into aprons, books, and lunchboxes. The driver found one on his dashboard. "Thank you for always driving me safely. You never complain. You have a kind heart." The gardener found one near the hose. "The flowers bloom because of your hands. I love how you smile at the trees." Even the housekeeper, who rarely spoke to Aisha, found a note tucked into her cleaning supplies. "I hope your day is peaceful. Thank you for making the house shine. You matter, even when no one says it." Aisha didn't know it, but her little letters were changing the house. The air felt softer. People smiled more. Even the other staff began to speak kindly to one another. One evening, Madam Williams called Aisha into the living room. "Aisha," she said gently, holding a small stack of folded notes. "Do you know what this is?" Aisha nodded shyly. "These are the most beautiful words I've ever read," Madam whispered. "You have a gift," Mr. Williams added. "You see people the way the world forgets to see them. Never stop writing." And then, something happened that Aisha never expected. Mr. Williams picked up his phone. He called someone at a publishing house, a friend. "I have something you need to see," he said. The next week, a woman named Miss Clara visited the mansion. She was an editor. She wore glasses and carried a stack of white paper. She sat with Aisha, smiled warmly, and said, "I read your letters. They made me cry. They made me hope. We want to print them into a small book to inspire other young girls." Aisha's eyes widened. A book?" "Yes, my dear," Miss Clara nodded. "A book of hope, written by you." And just like that, the girl who once swept floors silently, the girl who thought she had no voice, became a writer. Her first book, Letters of Hope, was published the following year. It was small, simple, but powerful. It was sent to orphanages, schools in the village, libraries in poor neighborhoods. Young girls read her words and said, "If Aisha can do it, maybe I can too." Her letters weren't just words, they were seeds, and each one grew into something beautiful in someone's heart. Because sometimes it's not money, not power, not fame that changes the world. Sometimes it's just a little letter, written from a pure heart by a girl who dared to dream. Aisha was no longer the same girl who had first stepped into the mansion barefoot and frightened. Years had passed. The uniform fit better now, her voice was clearer, her smile was fuller, and her dreams were growing bigger than she ever imagined. She had gone from the last row in class to the front seat, from failing her first test to helping others pass theirs. She had become a quiet light in her school. But what she didn't know was that her light was about to shine far beyond the school gates. It was a normal Sunday dinner when Mr. Williams looked up from his phone with a smile. "Aisha," he said, "someone from the Youth Leadership Summit called today." She paused, blinking. "The what, sir?" "It's a national event," he explained. "Young voices from across the country. They've heard about your letters. They want you to give a speech in Abuja." Aisha froze. Her fork slipped from her hand. Me?" she whispered. "Why?" Mr. Williams chuckled warmly. "Because, my dear, your story matters. The world is listening." Every evening, after homework, after chores, after quiet prayers, she sat with her notebook and poured her heart onto the page. She didn't use fancy words. She didn't try to sound important. She simply told the truth. "My name is Aisha. I was once a girl who had no shoes, no books, no voice. But someone believed in me, and now I believe in myself. I am proof that even a girl with nothing can become someone the world listens to if she's given a chance." It was Aisha's first time flying. She wore a simple gown, one Madam Williams helped her pick, and carried her speech in a small folder. Her hands trembled, but her heart burned with something fierce and beautiful. Courage. As the plane took off, she looked out the window and whispered, "Dear God, please let my words matter." The conference hall was grand. There were over 2,000 people in the audience, journalists, students, educators, government leaders, all seated, waiting, cameras pointed at the stage, lights bright and intimidating. Aisha stood behind the curtain, nervous. Her palms were sweaty, her legs felt weak. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears. "I can't do this," she whispered. But then, she heard a voice behind her. "Remember who you are." It was Madam Williams, holding her shoulders firmly. "You are not a house help anymore. You are hope." Aisha nodded, eyes shining, and then they called her name. She walked onto the stage. The lights hit her face. The room fell silent. She stepped up to the microphone, took a deep breath, and began. "Good morning. My name is Aisha Musa. I am 17 years old, and I used to believe that my life would never matter. I was born in a village where girls were not sent to school. My father died before I could speak well. My mother worked until her back bent like a question mark, but we had no answers. I became a house help at the age of 10. I thought that would be my story forever. Scrubbing floors, staying silent, hoping for food. But then, someone saw me. Mr. and Mrs. Williams gave me more than a job. They gave me love. They gave me books. They gave me a desk in a classroom. They gave me a future. And because of them, I am standing here today. But this is not just my story. This is the story of every child who is told they are too poor to matter, every girl who is told to stay quiet, every boy who is told to drop out and survive. I am here to say, we are more. We are thinkers, we are writers, we are leaders. If only someone would believe in us, we would rise. The audience was silent, not a whisper. Aisha paused, her voice quivering. Let us build a world where a girl with no shoes can one day stand on a stage and be heard. Because when we lift the forgotten, we lift the future. She stepped back slowly, and then, thunderous applause. People stood up. They clapped for minutes. Some hugged her afterward. Reporters rushed in with microphones. One woman said, "I haven't cried in years until I heard you." Her photo appeared in newspapers the next day. From house help to hero, the girl who moved a nation. She opened her notebook and wrote a final line that night. Dear future me, you did it. You spoke, and the world listened. And this is just the beginning. It had been 2 weeks since Aisha gave her speech. 2 weeks since she stood on a stage and reminded the world that the forgotten deserved to be heard. The world was beginning to recognize her. Invitations, interviews, even a scholarship offer from a private academy. But while the world was celebrating Aisha, something else was stirring quietly in the shadows. Something from her past. One rainy afternoon, Madam Williams walked into the living room, holding a small envelope. It had no return address, no name, just a single word, for Aisha. She handed it to her gently. Aisha opened it, her hands trembling slightly. "My daughter, I don't know if you still remember me. I don't even know if you want to. But I saw your photo in the newspaper. I am proud of you, and I miss you every single day. Please, if you are willing, I want to see you one more time before I leave this world. I'm sorry." The letter was signed, Mama Zainab. Aisha froze, her eyes locked on the name, her breath caught in her throat. It had been 10 years since she last saw her mother, 10 years since she had been left with strangers, 10 years since she had cried herself to sleep, wondering, why didn't she come back? Why did she leave me? Now, after all this time, she wanted to come back. That night, Aisha sat alone under the stars. The garden was quiet. The sky stretched above her like an ocean. Mr. Williams sat beside her without saying a word. After a long silence, Aisha whispered, "Why? Did she leave me?" He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Sometimes people break, Aisha. They break so deeply, they don't know how to be whole again. Maybe she didn't know how to hold you and her pain at the same time." Tears rolled down Aisha's cheeks. "But I needed her." Mr. Williams nodded, his own eyes glistening. "I know, sweetheart, I know." A few days later, Aisha agreed to meet her mother. The car pulled into a small town outside Lagos. Dusty roads, broken fences, homes made of patched tin roofs. They arrived at a small house. It was quiet, almost forgotten by the world. But inside, a woman waited. Aisha stepped out of the car slowly, her heart pounding. And then, there she was, older, thinner, wrinkles lining her face like stories carved by pain. But her eyes were the same. "Mama Zainab," she stepped forward. "Aisha," she whispered. But Aisha couldn't speak. She stood still, frozen in the moment where pain and love collided. Her mother fell to her knees. "I failed you. I broke everything I was supposed to protect. I didn't want to leave, but I had no choice. I was sick, I was scared, and the world, it swallowed me." Aisha's eyes filled with tears. "I waited for you. Every day, I thought you didn't want me." Her mother sobbed. "You were the only thing I wanted, but I thought you were better off without me." And in that moment, without planning it, without understanding it, Aisha bent down and embraced her. Not because it erased the past, not because it was easy, but because her heart was bigger than her pain. They sat together for hours that day. Aisha listened to her mother's story of sickness, of loss, of regret, of watching her from afar. She learned she had a younger half-brother she'd never met. She learned her mother had cleaned schools to survive, the same kind of work Aisha had once done. "I used to think I was born to suffer," her mother said. "But you changed everything, just by being brave." Aisha reached out, holding her mother's hand. "Then maybe we can heal together." When Aisha returned home that night, the mansion lights were still on. She sat on her bed and opened her notebook. "Dear past, I see you now, not with anger, but with understanding. You shaped me, you hurt me, but you did not define me. I am choosing peace." She placed the letter in a small box, next to her first pair of shoes, her speech, and her book of letters. Her story was no longer about pain. It was about healing. Days later, Aisha returned to her mother's village. She brought food, clothes, and school supplies. She met her little brother. She told him bedtime stories, and in the center of the village, she made a promise. "I will not forget where I came from, but I will not let it limit where I'm going." She began building a small learning center, a place for girls like her, girls who had once been forgotten, girls who needed someone to remind them they could dream. Narrator closes with warmth and hope. Sometimes, the past comes knocking not to break us, but to give us one last chance to forgive, to love, and to begin again. And Aisha, she answered that knock, not with hate, but with grace, because the girl who once had no shoes now walked in strength, and she was no longer afraid of where she came from. They say when a person rises from pain and finds purpose, they do not just walk for themselves, they walk for others too. Aisha was no longer walking barefoot. She was walking with intention. Her dream was simple, yet powerful. I want to build a place where no child is told you can't. She didn't want a palace. She didn't want gold or lights or cameras. She just wanted one small building, a room, a table, books, chalk, and girls sitting, learning, believing. Back at the Williams mansion, Aisha stood in front of a large whiteboard in her bedroom. On it, she had pinned scraps of ideas, a hand-drawn sketch of a classroom, quotes from leaders she admired, a photo of Malala, and a folded paper where she had written in bold letters, "The Lighthouse, a safe space for girls." She smiled as she looked at it every morning. It reminded her of the power of dreams, even fragile ones. Mr. and Mrs. Williams walked in one morning with warm tea. "Still working on your dream?" Mr. Williams asked. Aisha nodded, her eyes glowing. "I want them to read, to dream, to lead, just like I was allowed to." Madam Williams squeezed her hand. "Then let's build it, sweetheart." Construction began that summer, not with machines or contractors. Not at first. It started with a village and a vision. Mr. Williams donated the land, a quiet field near Aisha's mother's home. Aisha drew out the design with help from her teachers. And every weekend she went there, in jeans, with her sleeves rolled up, and carried bricks with the local workers. Villagers gathered around in wonder. Some thought it was a dream too big for such a young girl. But Aisha smiled and kept working. "This is for your daughters," she would say. "This is for the girl who hides behind her mother's wrapper when guests visit. This is for the girl who writes her name in sand because she has no book." And slowly, the lighthouse began to rise. But dreams do not rise without storms. One week, the main sponsor pulled out. The rains delayed the roofing, and some elders in the community didn't like the idea of girls becoming too bold. "She's too young to change anything," they whispered. "She should be quiet. Girls who shine attract trouble." Aisha overheard one of these conversations in the village market. She went home that night and cried in silence. But then, she picked up her old notebook and flipped to the first page she ever wrote in the mansion. "I am more than what they said I'd be." She stood up, wiped her tears, and the next morning, she walked into the local radio station. On the radio, she told her story. She spoke with heart, with fire, with humility. "They said I was nothing, but someone gave me a book. Someone gave me hope. Now I want to give it back to every girl in this village. This is not just a building. This is a beginning." The story caught fire. Donations came in, small and large. A group of women from Lagos pledged new books. A retired teacher volunteered to help train the girls. And a famous Nigerian poet posted about her on Instagram. "Aisha is what happens when you plant love instead of labels." 6 months later, on a golden morning wrapped in celebration and dust, the lighthouse opened its doors. It was small, just 3 rooms and a dusty playground. But to Aisha, it was everything. Balloons hung from the gates. Villagers gathered in awe. Children giggled in clean uniforms that Aisha helped sew by hand. She stood at the front, ribbon in hand, surrounded by girls. "This building may be small," she said, voice steady, "but the dreams inside it are taller than mountains. Let every girl who walks in here know she is loved, she is capable, she is enough." She cut the ribbon. Cheers erupted. A choir of young girls sang a song Aisha wrote herself, about books, hope, and the future. Her mother, standing in the crowd, wept softly. "My child," she whispered, "you have changed the world." That evening, Aisha sat in the very first classroom. There were no students yet, just her and a flickering lantern. She placed a stack of new books on the teacher's desk. She ran her fingers across the wooden chairs. She sat in one quietly and whispered to herself, "From house help to helper, from forgotten to foundation. Let the light shine, always." And then she smiled, because she knew the journey was far from over. But this chapter, this was the start of 1,000 more. She built more than a school. She built a promise that no girl would feel too poor to dream again, that every child, no matter how small, would have a place to grow, that the world doesn't need more perfect people. It needs more people like Aisha, who rise and then lift others too. Her heart beat faster than she could calm. Her breath caught in her throat. She read the words on the letter again and again, her eyes unable to believe. "Congratulations, Miss Aisha Danjuma. You have been selected as one of 3 finalists for the prestigious Global Rise Award for Youth Impact. You are invited to attend the international ceremony in New York City. Aisha blinked slowly. She looked around the hotel room, her suitcase still unpacked. She remembered a time she didn't even own a pair of shoes. Now, she was being honored among world leaders, and suddenly, she felt overwhelmed. Back home in the village, the news spread like wildfire. The radio host from Lagos mentioned her name on every morning show. Newspapers printed her photo beside global influencers. TV cameras arrived at the lighthouse, capturing children smiling in neat uniforms. Mr. Williams proudly held a press conference, calling her Nigeria's brightest light. But for Aisha, the attention came with a strange pressure. She was grateful, deeply, but she wasn't used to the spotlight. She wasn't sure she wanted it. In the days leading up to the trip, Aisha began to feel what she hadn't felt in a long time: fear. Not the fear of being poor again, not the fear of being unloved, but the fear of being seen, truly seen. What if they asked her about her past? What if they found out she was once a house help? Would they still see her as worthy? Would they laugh at her English, her accent, her scars? Why are you even going to school? You'll end up like your mother, sweeping someone's home, a neighbor once told her. Now that voice whispered again, louder than the applause around her. But she remembered something Mr. Williams once told her. You're not here because of luck, Aisha. You're here because of who you are and who you refuse to stop being. She took a deep breath. She folded the award letter, and she packed her bags. It was her first time on a plane, first time leaving Nigeria, first time seeing snow fall from the sky. Aisha arrived in New York with her eyes wide and heart pounding. She wore a simple but elegant Ankara dress, sewn by women from her village. She walked into the global conference hall, surrounded by tall buildings and taller voices, but she walked with grace, with humility, and with fire in her spirit. The room was filled with people from over 60 countries, activists, educators, world leaders. When Aisha's name was called, the hall fell silent. She stepped up to the podium, lights shining on her face. She looked around, at the sea of powerful people, then down at her worn journal tucked in her handbag. And then she spoke. Good evening. My name is Aisha Danjuma. 10 years ago, I was sweeping floors and sleeping in corners. I was told I didn't belong in classrooms, that I would never matter. But someone saw me. Someone gave me a book and believed I could be more. She paused, her voice shaking slightly. I didn't come here as a hero. I came as a reminder that potential doesn't come dressed in riches. Sometimes it comes barefoot, with hope in its eyes. And when you give a girl a chance, you don't just change her life, you change generations. The hall erupted into applause. Some stood, some wept, some whispered her name like a prayer. That night, Aisha sat in her hotel room, staring out at the glowing city skyline. She held the award in her hands, a sleek golden sculpture shaped like an open book. Suddenly, there was a knock on her door. A woman entered, a representative from a major global education firm. Aisha, we want to offer you a full university scholarship here in the U.S., and after graduation, a leadership position in our international division. It's a 6-year path. You'd be leading policy decisions. You'd have funding, influence. Aisha blinked. It was a dream beyond dreams, but something pulled at her heart. 6 years, away from the lighthouse? She asked. The woman nodded. Yes, but it's your future. Aisha thanked her, smiled, but said she needed time. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat on her bed, opened her journal, and wrote, Do I chase the stars, or do I stay to light candles? When she returned to Nigeria, the village threw a celebration. Girls from the lighthouse hugged her like a returning queen. One girl ran to her, holding up a small drawing, a picture of Aisha with wings. I want to be like you, the girl said, but please don't go away too long. Aisha bent down, hugged the girl tightly, and whispered, I'm not going anywhere, not yet. She could have had the world. She chose to build her own instead. She chose impact over fame, purpose over comfort, presence over prestige, because some hearts are too big to be boxed into boardrooms. And Aisha, she wasn't chasing the world. She was shaping it, one girl, one book, one light at a time. Absolutely. Here comes the grand, emotional finale. There are moments in life when everything comes full circle. Where the same roads you once walked in tears, you now walk with strength. Where the same house you once served in silence now speaks your name with honor. This was that moment for Aisha. Years had passed since she first walked barefoot into the billionaire's home, shy and scared, her life packed in a threadbare wrapper. Now she stood tall, not because of power, not because of money, but because of purpose. The Williams family had called her. Aisha, Mr. Williams said over the phone, "We're retiring, and we're throwing one last gala, and we want you to be our guest of honor." She gasped, not because it was a surprise, but because that mansion was where her story had truly begun. As she stepped into the mansion's courtyard, memories rushed like waves. There, the corridor where she used to mop. There, the garden where Madam once brought her biscuits and asked, "What's your name, darling?" There, the small staff room where she slept, curled up, whispering dreams into the night. She paused, closed her eyes, whispered, "Thank you." The mansion was decorated in soft gold lights. Guests came in silks and suits. Laughter floated in the air. Music played softly. But when Aisha entered, the room fell still for a moment. She wasn't wearing diamonds, just a long emerald green dress made by village tailors, with earrings from a local beadmaker. But her presence lit the room more than chandeliers ever could. Madam Williams walked toward her, teary-eyed. "You are the most beautiful thing we ever helped grow," she whispered, hugging her. Mr. Williams followed, holding something small in his hand, a box. "This is yours, Aisha, a gift and a sign of what you've become to us." Inside the box was a key. She looked up at him, puzzled. "That's the key to this home," he said. "We're giving you partial ownership, not because of charity, but because of legacy. You turned this house from stone into story." Aisha stood at the podium. Cameras flashed, eyes watched, but she didn't prepare a fancy speech. She simply spoke from her soul. "I came to this house as a servant. I cleaned your floors, I ate your leftovers, but what you gave me was not food or clothes or gold. You gave me a seat at the table. You gave me a mirror, one that showed me I was more than my past. Today I run schools. I speak to thousands, but the truest honor of my life is this. I got to live out my purpose, and I did it without ever forgetting where I came from." The room broke into thunderous applause. Tears fell, not just hers, but from every heart in the room. Back home, the sun was setting as Aisha entered her childhood home, a small hut her mother still lived in, despite her pleas to move her to the city. "Mama," she called out softly. Her mother turned, older now, slower, but her eyes just as strong. "My daughter," she whispered, hugging her tightly. Aisha knelt before her. From her handbag, she pulled out an envelope, papers for land, a new house plan, and a bank account in her mother's name. "This is for you. Everything I've become started in your prayers." Her mother wept. She looked at her daughter and simply said, "You were my answered prayer. Now you're an answer for others." Months later, the lighthouse opened a second branch, bigger, brighter, more advanced. Among the new girls admitted was a shy 8-year-old orphan named Halima. She didn't speak much. She flinched at loud noises. She sat in corners and drew with her fingers in the sand. One day, Aisha sat beside her silently. Then she whispered, "I used to be just like you." Halima looked up, unsure. "But someone believed in me, and now I believe in you." She handed her a notebook. On the first page, she had written, "To the girl with no shoes, walk proudly. You are going far." We don't choose how our stories begin, but we can choose how they grow, how they rise, how they echo in the lives of others. Aisha was once a whisper in the corner of a house. Now she's a voice, bold, beautiful, and full of purpose. And her story? It didn't end here. Because every girl who walks into the lighthouse walks into a story she helped build.